time to spend time with us. So one of the first things I wanted to do was for us to maybe spend some time just being fully present. It's what is his name? Eckhart Tolle, and he says something so important. He says, one of the things we don't do is that we don't stay fully present in the moment because we're so looking forward to the next moment. And because we're looking forward to the next moment, we don't get everything that this moment holds for us. And so I wanted us to take a moment and just take a deep breath in. So let's do that together. Take a deep breath in through here's Isabel with me, my niece, and she's going to join us today. Let's take a deep breath in, Bella. Through the nose and out through your mouth. And in again and out. So I don't know what your day might have looked like, and I don't know how much you had going on, but what we want you to do is to just be fully present in this moment. There's so much to learn and so much to gain. And the best way you can do that is if your mind is fully present and fully here and fully engaged with us. So I know for a lot of you who's joined us over the weeks, you know that we've been going through a number of series and a number of topics that has unfolded, and we really listen to you and we take guidance from you, and we take whatever you're saying seriously, and then we craft these sessions to try and be as adaptive to you as it possibly can. And so today we're going to talk, and I don't know if you were with us last week, you know that I nudged Tembela really hard. That's what I told her I was going to do. I was going to nudge her really hard, and we were going to look at how do we help you guys around negotiation. Negotiation has come up in these sessions so many times, and so we knew it is something that we needed to do. And so today what we're going to talk about is power. We're going to talk about what is power, how do you navigate power in your workplace, how do you map power, and then how do you use those who have influential power to help you make change happen. And so we're so glad that you joined us. I can see people are still joining us. So welcome for all of you who are just joining. Today we're talking about power, and I'm happily going to give this over to Tembela, who's going to contextualize what today is going to be about.
Okay, whilst Cher is looking and trying to admit people that are still trying to join in. Today, actually, you know, as we were preparing for today's session, I remembered a story, which is a real story that happened in my family, which I know that is a story of many other women. My niece graduated from varsity last year, and she went on into her honors degree. So before she could actually even, you know, like graduate for her honors, she came to us one day so excited and telling us that she's got a job. And you can imagine the excitement in her, as well as the entire family, when we got to know that this little girl or this young woman is moving straight from university into a job. And I can remember, you know, like all the stories, you know, how the aunties and the uncles, how they will congratulate one of their own, you know, when they hear about such beautiful stories that, hey, you've got a job at a time when it is so difficult to find work. I remember calling her a few weeks after she started her job, and I asked her, how are things going? And it was actually very sad, I think, when I got her response, because the dreams that she has had and the excitement that she had at the beginning, at the beginning of the year as she was going into that job, it had actually dimmed and like it went down. And then I mean, of course, we had to ask a question as to what's going on in that job. And what we found was that she had actually soon discovered that, in fact, the dreams that she had in her mind about work and all that were not as rosy, you know, like as she had thought. And the truth is that the issue was not so much the job itself, but it was really more the conditions at work that were not exciting. She felt she didn't have the freedom and all that. And then I think one of the painful things for us as we looked at her was that besides the fact that the workplace itself was not what she thought it would be, she actually felt so disempowered. She didn't know how she could actually negotiate her way out, or like what are her rights, or who's the right person that she could actually talk to. I remember, like, as an aunt who's a coach, I tried to talk to her a number of times to say, hey, maybe this is what you should do and all that. And I know, and we all know she's not the only one. We've been talking in the past few weeks amongst ourselves, and we've been hearing this kind of a story from time to time where women are actually saying what they've observed during this time of lockdown is that the workplace is not as exciting as they had thought it would be. The conditions actually are not conducive for them as women. And as Shay is saying, the bigger issue that we actually picked up was that more than anything, many times when we find ourselves into those sticky situations, the bigger problem is that we do not know which way to tend to. And so Shay is right when she says we've actually listened. What we normally do after the sessions is that we do the debriefing to check what are we hearing, and sometimes we even go back to the recordings to hear what are people saying that we probably might have missed during the session. And we've been hearing the same message over and over again, that women find workplaces quite oppressive, and many times they don't have the capacity to negotiate power. And so when we discussed, we decided we are going to invite one of ours, Barbara Kalima Piri. I said to her, I want her to tell me all her credentials. Okay, she didn't give me everything. But I was actually saying, I always want to make sure that we bring the best into this platform. And we've actually had very exciting, very empowering discussions. So today, Babs is going to speak to us just to excite you, because I am excited. Barbara, I have to read this one, is a Global Senior Advisor of Gender and Inclusion at World Vision International. She's also a Goodwill Ambassador for Push Women Network in Zambia. I'm sure there are a lot of other things that Babs can share about herself, but for today, we will just leave it there. If you want to hear more about her, go to her LinkedIn profile, or you can also talk to her after this session. So Babs will be talking to us about how do we navigate power in the workplace. So in our briefing with her, we actually said to her, we don't want her to only talk about our own capacity as women. We want to talk about how do we as individual women and perhaps as a collective negotiate that power, but we also understand that workplaces are part of a bigger system. So it's one thing to empower women, but if they go back to a place that has got, like, where you actually find that conditions are not changing, it becomes very frustrating. So we asked her to answer two questions for us. On our side, what do we do? How do we capacitate ourselves so that we are able to shift decisions at the workplace? But also, what is it that workplaces can actually do to make sure that we feel safe to actually speak up when we feel that things are not going all right? So welcome to all of you, and welcome, Babs. And for those who are joining us for the first time, this space is a space for us as women to empower ourselves. We call it Lunchtime Connect. That is going to change because now we're no longer having the sessions during lunch. So welcome, and yeah, have a good time. We will be conversing, so don't let Babs to speak alone. Yeah, welcome. Babs, we are not hearing you.
Yes. Hi, Tembela, and hello, everyone. I'm trying to share my screen at the same time as joining in the meeting. I'm really excited to be associated with Womaneco. Womaneco is one of those networks that really touches my heart. And I've told Tembela that I'm willing to work for you for free because of the cause for the women. And so we go back and forth, you know, shaping the work of Womaniko. And I just love these connect sessions because they're a place, it's a safe place. In fact, I'll tell you that Womaniko is a safe place. You can bring any story there. It feels like, you know, with these fireplaces that they organize, it feels like going back home, sitting with your grandparents, sharing deep stories about life. So I feel very honored to be part of this conversation. Today particularly, I'm excited, but I'm also feeling sick, really, really sick, because I was trying to look at what is trending in Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and all the other social media platforms. And I bumped into this George Floyd, you know, news, and my heart is just broken. And this is a guy, an African-American, 46-year-old, obviously might have family. Just hold on a minute. I just need to tell my son to keep quiet a bit. Yeah, so sorry about that. The 46-year-old African-American man, George Floyd, was badly brutalized by the American police. You know, the person is helpless, is handcuffed, and, you know, he's nailed to the ground. He's shouting, you know, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And the police is just, you know, shelving him until he died. And to me, you know, what that picture gives me is a couple of things that relate to the topic today. The first one is that racism is real and is still alive, and it needs to be nailed. We need to find ways of, you know, dealing with racism in all its forms and in all its shapes and sizes. We need to deal with that. The second thing that comes to me is that really Black lives still matter. And in fact, every life matter. But in the context of America, obviously, you know, Black lives really, really matter in this case. The third reflection for me, which connects very much to the topic today, is this issue of power. So if you look at that policeman, it's the same as your South Africa police officer, the subs. If they have the badge, you know, they have some power, they have authority, they have, because they're carrying behind them a state machinery that gives them that power and authority. Obviously, they've got power to arrest you. They've got the authority to arrest you. They've got the influence to lock you into the cells, but they do not have the right and the authority to kill you. So this to me, when I look at it, it's clearly where it's a lot of issues, but it's a clear depiction of how power is being abused, because you've got that badge, you've got the power. It's the same scenario where, you know, you're driving along the road, you have a policeman stop you. You're driving a huge truck, but this small man wearing, you know, NYPD or SAP SAP's uniform stops you. Because even if it's small and you've got a big truck, he's got this power that is designated in him that makes you to stop and obey him. But that power can also be abused. And in this case, you can see that it was clearly abused. So I thought I could just start with that, feeling really, really uncomfortable, feeling quite sad that, you know, we can have clear cases where power can be abused to lead to even death. So I don't know if my screen is being shared, Tembele, for my presentation.
Yes, we can see it, Barbara.
Oh, okay. So as Tembele rightly put it, and Cheryl, I think this is a conversation. So I hope that we can all participate in this conversation and be able to build one another as women who are navigating through a workplace. I always think about a workplace as a twofold. A workplace can be a battlefield. Like, you know, Tembele talked about her niece. It can be a battlefield, a place where you feel you don't want to go there because constantly you have to be fighting these powers. You have to be fighting, co-workers, you have to be fighting managers and all the politics within that place. I also call it a green field, as much as it might be a battlefield, it can also be a green field, a place where you grow, a place where you bring yourself, your true self, and implement your skills, your experience, and all the things, the knowledge that you have, and so on. So depending on where you are today, whether you're feeling like in a battlefield or you are in a green field, this conversation, I hope, will help you navigate through that. So the way we've set it up is that I'm going to really give you a few facts about COVID, because we're talking about COVID-19 and how women are struggling with so many things. But also the important thing really is about how they can navigate through the workplace. So let me just give you a quick facts about COVID-19 pandemic. So as of 21st May, we are told that there are about 5.1 million confirmed cases of COVID, and almost about 330,000 that have been deceased. And almost every country, as you would know, is affected with this COVID-19, with about 30% of the population being in the US. We've had these forced school closures in about 191 countries. And this is almost about 85% of students globally, both at tertiary level, high school and primary level, that have been affected by these school closures. 1.6 billion workers, the majority of them in informal sector, and majority women are in danger of losing their jobs. And when it comes to women and children, they're really, really at a heightened risk of abuse, exploitation, and violence. In fact, the UNFPA is saying that up to 85 million more girls and boys worldwide may be exposed to physical, sexual, emotional violence over the 3 months as a result of COVID, in the next couple of months to say. And also about 13 million extra child marriages have been predicted. Are being predicted by UNFPA that they will occur immediately after the crisis. We've seen reports, we've seen about the poor access to hygiene, supplies, water, accommodation, and so many other challenges that COVID has brought to the fore. And so these are the factors. But what are some of the challenges that women themselves are facing as they're dealing with COVID in the workplace? One of the things that has come up, and I think in Womaniko we've spoken about this thing, that we've been taught to stay at home, to work from home, but balancing work and balancing home and workloads at home is not been very easy for a lot of people. And our friend, is it Skol is on the call, I suppose. She always talks about this, busting the multitasking myth, saying that even if we say that women are multitaskers, it is a myth. In fact, we're simply doing more work. So even in my own situation, where I don't have a helper, I have to look after the kids, do homeschooling, who can take care of the house. It is a difficult balancing act, and I'm sure a number of people are struggling with that a lot. But when it comes to the organization, for example, in fact, I read one other article that they're telling us that we can work from home, having flexible working hours, but basically the woman has not left the kitchen. That's what it is. So even if you're in the boardroom, from the boardroom, you still come back to the kitchen. So you've not left the kitchen literally, because you're working 24/7. Coming to the workplace, there are quite a number of challenges that keep popping up. And as we speak in different fora, we speak in different platforms, we're hearing the same things, that there are some people, some women and some staff that are taught to work from home, but with very little organizational support. In some cases, they're not given the tools of the trade. You have big corporations, for example, that may not even allow you to go home with a laptop because of the secrecy and the guarding of the information about the organization, but they still expect you to really push your targets and work from home. Sometimes it could be, I understand in one of my kids' school, where teachers have been taught to do homeschooling, but they have no data. And so they keep sending these voice notes, to the children on WhatsApp and say, we really, really don't have the data. So the tools of the trade has become one of the pain points for a lot of women in the workplace when it comes to working from home and working from typically not the traditional place where they would work from. And because COVID came as a surprise to many, even organizations, nobody prepared for it. You have organizations that have been caught unawares, so they have no clear guidance or policies on how they can institute flexible working arrangements. Some of them are working through some of these, but others not. So, and even some managers, just to adapt to this thing of having somebody sitting in another place is not easy, especially if you have managers that are micromanagers. They want to see the bum in the seat, literally, you know. So, and when you say that in the morning, I have to, you know, make sure that I log into homeschooling for my kids, do a bit of cleaning and so on. Can I work in the afternoon? Flexible working arrangements sometimes have been very difficult for most women. Now, the most exciting piece, I think, is really about lack of voice. So you have all these challenges, you know, that you're experiencing as a woman working in this workplace, but you don't have the voice or the power to negotiate new terms or to even speak out, speak truth to power. You see, you know, this victimization, you see unfair treatment, and some people are actually not even being paid. I've read in the newspapers where companies have made huge profits in this COVID-19, but they still claim that they're making losses and they don't want to pay their workers. And you know for sure that this is a reality and you don't have the voice, you don't have the power. And sometimes you may have the voice, but you don't have the space because you are sitting somewhere below management. You don't have the space, you don't have the authority, or you don't sit on the table where decisions are being made, literally. So you kind of thinking, what am I going to do now? I need this job to survive. And I need to make sure that, you know, I raise these issues. How do I do it? So this is where the whole discussion around power, voice, you know, negotiation becomes a very big piece of what we need to be empowering ourselves as women to make sure that we can navigate through. And so I'm just going to give you a few definitions about, you know, what is power, because it's a big topic, and I'm just looking at power in the workplace. What is power in the workplace? So power, again, like I said, is a word that gets the adrenaline going in some and strikes fear in others, because you're imagining every time you think about the workplace, oh my God, you're thinking about that lunatic of a boss that you have, and you're thinking, goodness me, how am I gonna, oh, sorry, I would have used some French word, but Lord help me. You know, you're just in that state where you just feel like, Lord, and my son always says, can that man be hit by a truck or something? You know, you're in that state where you're really thinking, goodness me, you know, so that, I mean, and workplace power is integral to the part, you know, is an integral part of any business environment. You cannot run away from it. They say that where there are people, there are politics. So you can't run away from it. And, you know, politics and power is about negotiating choices, making decisions around choices, making decisions around those choices that you have. And so when it comes to power, there are different people who have power in the organization. So and the way power is defined is that is the capacity of an individual to influence the conduct of others. And when you have power, you are possessing control. You have authority, you have influence as well over others, events, and even situations. So sometimes we may think that we don't have power, and I hope that by the end of today, we'll feel very powerful and we'll be able to go and move the needle in our workplace and change the situation where we are. So you have, in organizations, you have different levels of management. You have those that are below management, then senior management, then you have the top management, who are your CEOs and others that have a lot of power, that yields a lot of influence as well. And what's her name? This psychologist, Nicole Lipkin, once said that power isn't something you hold or you keep. It's something you create. And in order to own your power, you must build it yourself and continue building it every day. I was quite impressed with this. I thought, wow. So, but then I don't even know if I have power. So how can I even start, creating it? Or, how can I even start building on it every day? So I hope that, when we go through this conversation, we will feel quite empowered with knowing whether we have power or not. So Lipkin, defines power in the workplace using 6 definitions. And when you look at the list that I've put up there, you have legitimate power, for example. Maybe before I go to the list, people will may put questions in the chat, and they can, we'll be able to respond to some of them. And if you have experiences around some of the things that I'm talking about, please do feel free to share as well. Like I said at the beginning, Womaniko is a very safe place. I love Womaniko. It creates that enabling environment for us to chat and tell our stories. And I think the more we tell our stories, the more we become powerful as well, because it's our story that changes the situations for others who may have been in similar situations as well. So there is legitimate power, and this power is can be described as the traditional power where a person has a role or a title. And of course, people question, why was that person given that role and so on. You could be the managing director for a multi-billion company, or even MTN and so on. You are the person that has got the title as manager, as director. So it is they've given you that authority. But you also have legitimate power, political power, which is designated power. So for example, for our politicians, we vote them into office. We give them power to conduct affairs of the country. So they possess that control of resources. They have the authority to enact laws and even, influence decisions that may affect our well-being as citizens. So there is legitimate power in the workplace, is the title that you hold. In the political sphere, it's the power that is designated by the masses, by the citizens. It is quite powerful to have that. Unfortunately, when you lose that title, that power goes with you, with it. It goes with the title. Then you have this cohesive power. So this is where, in other words, people would call it dictatorial power. It's normally not the best power that you'd have. And you tell me that you've seen some of your managers or some of your leaders who practice this cohesive power. They have these tendencies of using a carrot, and then they also punish you with a stick. And in some cases, they use a lot of divide and rule. So they use the inner circle. You have people who come to these managers or leaders and give them information, and they use a heavy hand. They're dictators. It's cohesive. It's very, very strong. In the long term, really, it impacts on the reputation of the organization and also of the individual as well. It's not normally the best power you can have. In some instances, some people think that, when you have cohesive power, then you can really move mountains. It's normally not the best power to have. It makes you feel so powerful, but you really do not empower your followers. And when chips are down, you literally remain on your own. And then you have this expert power. And this is what I want to talk about a lot more, because it's really talking to where we are now in COVID-19. And when we look at women and the positions that they have, we have a lot of women that have got expert power. This power is where you have the skills, you've got the ability to perform your work with excellence, with all of these things that you could imagine. In fact, expert power is just as powerful as legitimate power, because if, for example, you think about an engineer who's got expert knowledge about engineering and they have to open a new plant, and if that expert is not there to guide, the engineering designs and all of that stuff, believe you me, that project will not take off. So you have that power. So you may just not necessarily know that you had the power because of expert knowledge that you have. But today, the exciting news is that, we all have that expert power. And the expert power is also coupled with information power. So the information power is one where, you have the information and the knowledge in the field that you have. And sometimes it may not necessarily be the information about the area of work that you have. It could be information about, what you've read about or what you experienced, or information about, research that you bumped into or research that you did. So you have that valuable information that makes you an important piece in the organization. Haven't you noticed in some organizations where when a leader is stuck, they'll always say, "Oh, why don't we call Cheryl? I think Cheryl might know." I mean, Cheryl is not even an IT person, but the manager believes that Cheryl knows. I think Cheryl has some idea. Why don't we call Cheryl? And maybe Cheryl might be able to tell us something. So imagine Cheryl has got information power, may not have expert power, but she's got information power. And we need to use that information power. And this is why in COVID-19, if you are not an essential worker, for example, this is where you now begin to look at what other areas or skills should I be building myself in, so that I'm not just an engineer, I'm an engineer / a graphic designer, because I'm passionate about graphics. So if, for example, in the company where they're doing a design for engineering, the engineers are many, and then they also need someone to do graphics, you can say, oh, actually, I can also do the graphics. Imagine how valuable you would be to that organization. They would not need, every company wants to cut costs. So they will be so amazed that, we need to keep this person because, the person is able to bring in value to the organization, and they have enough information that can help with that. Then you have what we call reward power. So this power is a type of power that revolves around the ability to, create impact on salaries, bonuses, promotions. Basically, the people working in the cost structure, or even in the HR department, who determine, what rewards you should be getting, when you should get a promotion, and all of those things. So sometimes it can be a corrupt system because, and people can, it's not a very objective environment to be in, because you've seen, for example, even when you do your performance reviews, sometimes the rating, the system that is used may not necessarily, be as objective as you want it to be. So if you leave this power with this reward power in one person, believe you me, it may have some subjectivity in it, but it is power that we find in the workplace anyway. And then we have what we call the connection power. I love the connection power. And I think Womaniko has the connection power. So the connection power is where you have contacts and connections of people in high places, connections of people that can bring benefit to your organization. You have the networking capacity, you can connect. I can say, Tembela, please, I need to get a DM&E person, just at a fingertip, like, oh, I know somebody who's very good. I can connect you to them, So having that connecting power is very, very key. And when you combine expert power, information power, and connection power, you become a bomb, literally, as a woman in the organization. The title would not matter, even if you don't have the title. Having a combination of those is a real bomb. And so if you're still thinking about being an expert, you can begin to upskill yourself so that you really bring that power to the table. So the point I put on the bottom is that, having said all of this, and it sounds so important, it sounds so good, when it comes to a woman in the workplace, we have different dynamics that we're working with. So whether you have expert knowledge, there is what we call unconscious biases that are prevalent in organizations, and mainly dominated by male leaders, and sometimes women as well, that do not see the value and the expert knowledge that you're bringing. Because you're a woman, there are these unconscious biases that begin to judge a woman to think that the woman has to work double the amount to prove that they're good at it. So it becomes very difficult then for us as women to play the same game as the men because of this unconscious bias. And a lot of them are really driven by, the patriarchal systems and society we're working in, where they place a woman in a certain box and a man in another, and also driven by culture and all these different influences that we find ourselves in. So even when a woman has got expert power, there is always a very thin line for them to navigate through the boardroom. There's a very thin line for them to, because there's always that unconscious bias that we have to work through. Well, that sounds quite sad, but I'm sure we can find ways of navigating through that even as women, and that's why we're having this conversation. So so far so good. I hope you're enjoying the conversation. I hate to talk alone. Yes, Tembela?
I'm actually wondering, because there's a lot of discussion going on the chat box as well as on Facebook
Yes.
Today. I mean, perhaps before you can continue, we can bring that in, and then we can also, I don't know whether this was a time when you wanted to also get other people in terms of the contributions, perhaps?
No, maybe I could talk about how do we navigate through the workplace as women,
okay.
Because we've spoken about this power, and then we can then take a short break to answer some of the questions.
Okay, I think before we get into that, let's just hear what are people saying in the chat box and on Facebook. Sher, do you want to share on your side whilst I'm also looking on Facebook?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Tembela, and thank you, Bob. So far, I think this is so enlightening. I think one of the questions that came through is, how do you own, create, and continue to build your power in the spaces which you find yourself present? A very specific question came through around, where do you draw the line between being abused and being used by your organization under the guise of you holding expert or information power? So that is that is one for us to definitely tackle. Another one by Nandipa came in asking, how do you negotiate oppressive power that comes with white privilege in organizations? And then I think Skolile just highlighted something, which is something you said, Bobs, which you said this is the bomb. It's that there's a triple power in that you can be you can have expert power, information power, and connection power, and that becomes your differentiator. So I think I also took that. That's a really great point. Tembela, I'll give it to you for Facebook.
Yeah, there are some points that have been shared earlier which I'm missing on Facebook, but just to share those ones that I can see. Well, Constance is saying, Mukhale is saying, position power is not always effective if the title holder gets instructions from decision makers like donors and philanthropists. They are the ones who should be challenged to use their powers to bridge resources to benefit the powerless.
Yes.
Then Nkateko is saying, I'm loving these Babs. I will try and look out for the other ones that have been shared on Facebook. I'm not sure how come I'm not able to get into them that have been shared earlier.
So would you like me to respond to these questions, or I get into the conversation?
Yes, I guess you could respond to those to those, and then for the questions then that you think relate to what you will be speaking to next, you can just answer them later.
Okay, no, that's fine. I think what I'll do is that let me go to the next slide, because it answers quite a lot of the questions that people are asking. How do you create the power? And then where do you draw a line, being an expert and also being abused at the same time? I think when we go into some of the techniques that you can use, you may be able to look at that and maybe able to use them as well. The other one was about position power. How can we build the capacity of people holding position power to use it in a way that challenges the status quo and also helps the organization. And then this one around negotiating power in a white-dominated or white-privileged environment. I can tell you that it's not just in a white-dominated environment. It can be any situation. It can be in a situation where you may not be white, but you may be discriminated because of your disability, for example. You may be discriminated because of your caste, creed, age, many different ones. So, and race is predominantly one of them that, so I think the techniques we're gonna be looking at hopefully can help us navigate through those different hula hoops, whether it's race, creed, caste, or age, or whatever, or sexist, or whatever it is. I'm hoping we can get there now. So looking at power, and we've looked at the different types, and we've mentioned also that during this COVID-19, I think it's important that we begin to understand where we are in the organization, especially now that everybody's trying to create different strategies to survive. So there is what I call a personal responsibility for us to, which we need to take. And there's also the organizational responsibility that needs to be there. Sometimes the two don't balance, sometimes the two don't come together, but at least if we can do our part, maybe we can influence the organizational responsibility as well. So the first one that I'm looking at, for example, is that I was challenged when I looked at it actually, is about knowing your rights and organizational grievance procedures. I was asking myself today that, do I even know, do I even have a copy of the organizational grievance procedure, for example? And when was the last time I looked at my contract as well? When did I look at the labor policy and to look at what my rights are as an employee? Any one of you been in that space before? I'm like, goodness me, you know, but what are my rights? I said, and sometimes, you know, we get to the workplace, we're in this coffee, we're talking, this boss is mean, or he screamed at me, or, you know, and we're so miserable, you know, and then it ends there at the coffee space, because sometimes we don't even know our rights that you can actually stand up. You can say, I've got the right not to be victimized, for example. I've got the right to be in a safe environment. I've got the right to safety clothing. For example, if I'm working in the mine, I can't go underground without safety clothing. I've got the right to be in a secure place. I can't be in a workplace that is not secure. You know, I've got the right to maternity leave, for example. What policies, what are the benefits that I have? Even benefits in my contract. I said, sometimes I'm like, do I even know what other benefits are there? You keep hearing people saying, oh, that one is getting this salary and they're also getting a car allowance. And you're like, but how come we're doing the same job and, you know, I don't get it. You have not even checked your contract. What is it you're entitled to? You've not checked the Bill of Rights. What are your rights as a citizen? What are your rights? Do you know that we're all scared? There's only one thing in the workplace that people are scared of, to lose their job. And do you know that if you know your power, the boss is as scared shit of you as anything. I'm telling you, because they show that power. But if you know that you have the power, I'm telling you, you can bring an organization to a halt. I know you say, no, well, they're corrupt, you know, they bribe their way to CCMA and all of those things. And, you know, I'm telling you, the chickens will come to roost once you know your rights and you know the organizational grievance procedures. Somebody tries to harass you in the organization and you have nowhere to start from. Colleagues, please, let's go and read the grievance procedures. That's one thing that we need to do. So, for example, where you're being abused, you're an expert and you're being abused. What is your right in that organization? For example, what are the terms of your working hours? Is there a code of conduct? Does it mean that because you're an expert, you have to be on call 24/7? You need to go and check what the terms for that role that you have. If you've signed up that you be called 24/7, then you know you can't complain of being abused. But because we have not looked at it, you may want to just remind the manager and say, you know, my working hours are these, and you can be able to negotiate, my working hours are these, but it looks like I'm working overtime. I feel like I'm being abused, even if I'm the expert in this organization. So knowing your rights becomes one of the tools that we need to use to begin to navigate power in the workplace. I like the second one because it's one that is very close to my heart, and it is a big question right now, especially when we've been told to go home. Those that are able to work from home can work from home, and they've classified us, some of us have been classified essential workers, others non-essential. Sisters, I was so intrigued that when I came to read about what an essential worker is and what a non-essential worker is. A non-essential worker is one that is part of the organizational strategy, but is not as strategic and relevant for the organization. Does not mean that your qualifications are not relevant. It's only that at that particular juncture, the skills and the things that they need are not relevant for that particular cause or the particular event or a particular thing that they're doing as an organization. So you may be a receptionist and you have the qualification. Doesn't mean that your qualifications are bad, except that when the office is closed, you're not an essential worker. They will not need you there because the office is closed. If you're working in the restaurant and they say that, okay, we'll only be doing deliveries and you're a waitress, you're not an essential worker at that stage because your skills are not relevant for that particular strategy that the organization has taken. And this brings a big question to all of us, particularly in COVID, to say, so if I'm not an essential worker, what is it that I can do to make sure that I remain relevant in the organization? I remain that piece that will make the machine move. I need to be able to offer solutions. And this is where expert knowledge or expert power becomes quite key. And if you don't have the expert power, the information power, this is where we begin to look at upskilling ourselves. And remember, I said you're working not in a vacuum, working in an environment where it's very patriarchal and all of that. But this can be one of your draw cards that you can use if you begin to offer solutions and become an essential worker. The other one is that you need to get a sponsor, a collaborator. I was just talking to one of my colleagues today and saying that, I'm going to be talking about this power, and said, oh, Barbara, this is an interesting topic because I've had a challenge because we've got a donor who has given us a lot of money and has said that we should employ one of their relatives. And so they've employed that relative in that organization. But that relative is not performing. And because the donor is so powerful, is holding the money power, they're failing to discipline this young girl who's in this team. And they're wondering, how are we going to do it? Because if we don't discipline this person, we're going to have a challenge with our funding. So in this case, this is where I was saying to her that you may want to use a sponsor or collaborator. For example, a collaborator in this case might be your HR person, to say that why don't they hold a session about performance management? So they're not targeting that person. They're talking about how is performance going to affect funding for this organization, because they risk losing money in that project anyway if that person is not performing. So getting a collaborator, it could be a partner, it could be a person inside that can begin to help you to navigate through that tough situation. So you can also host a lunch or a learn event. Remember the spaces I was talking about, that you may have the power to create a space for conversation. In some instances, you may not have that power, but you can maybe work with collaborators, a partner, and say, why don't we have a webinar on, with leaders from different organizations? It's a quick lunch and learn where we look at what are some of the strategies that organizations are using to navigate through the impact of COVID, particularly on women, so that we can get their views. The moment you create that platform, the space, the conversation, your leaders, your managers begin to pick out one or two things that can help shape the way they're thinking about the things that they're doing. You could find that in that lunch and learn meeting, this is where people from another organization could be saying, oh, I've got a small child and I can't balance, working these long hours and managing homework and things like that. It could be in that lunch and learn event where your manager would hear about, that I don't even have data, or there's a policy that has just been instituted in our organization to support women, and things like that. So creating, remember what we said about how do you own and create the power? Create the space. Don't wait to be invited. They have invited spaces. Try to create the space, It could be just sharing information, a research piece from McKinsey reports or other institutions that have done good reports. You begin to push that information to the right people. You're beginning to own that power. You're beginning to create the space for that power, and you're beginning to grow that power, because it could just be an email or something that you'd have shared that triggers a bigger conversation in the organization. So that's how you begin to own and create power. And then use the platforms, like I said, to speak if you have them. Now with technology, you have some hotlines some organizations don't have. In World Vision, for example, we have some hotlines that you can use. There's also whistleblowing opportunities where if you're victimized, for example, you can begin to use that. So for example, for a person who feels that, I'm really an expert, I'm giving in quite a lot, but I'm not getting back what it is, and have been talking to my manager and it feels like a brick wall. Do a whistleblowing on them, girl. Just pull a whistleblowing rug on them. Yeah, and you'll be surprised how that will just, land itself on fertile ground and begins a conversation in the organization. The big one, and I think this is the big one that we want to look at today, is mapping where the power lies. Because you can have all of these things, but if you don't actually know where the power actually is, and the power talking about here is the power of decision making, the control, authority, and influence. Who is actually moving the needle? You need to know who's moving the needle, because you can end up talking to so many people, so frustrated, and yet they have no power whatsoever. They'll just say, oh, Sisi, I hear you. I understand. I used to be in that situation. They will not do anything. So let's begin to look at mapping where that power lies. And the moment you begin to map where the power lies, then that's the journey to navigating through, the workplace politics and the power play within the politics. Tembela, and that's how you begin to negotiate your spaces in there. Tembela, do you want us to go to the little exercise, the practical exercise now, and or you want to take some questions or some comments in the chat?
Do we have any questions, share on the chat and Ngati on Facebook?
No. So on the Zoom chat, we don't have anything new raised yet.
Okay.
I have asked all of our lovely ladies to share with us if you do have an example, if you created a platform, or if you even have a sponsor or a collaborator that you use. We'd love to hear real stories from you to contextualize what we're talking about. So please do use the chat. Kateko, over to you.
Yeah, on Facebook, it was comments, a lot of comments, I think at the beginning when she was talking, where they're talking about how kids will suffer and be left behind because a lot of women are heading homes, and also someone is raising, Constance is raising the issue of a clear race and class divide. And Bongi was saying that where there are people, there are politics. So it's mostly really comments on Facebook.
Okay, that's
Can
great.
Yeah, and then Constance also raised another issue of position power is not always effective if the title holder gets instruction from decision makers. I think that one is very interesting.
Yeah.
So I think this is where Barbara was talking about also connection, that those people in power should be challenged, and their power to bridge the benefits from resources.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Perhaps before you go into that, actually, I see that I've returned to Nkateko privately instead of to the group. I was actually saying it's very interesting. I think what Constance is also raising there, how, the issue of how people with a lot of power who control the resources can actually misuse their power, so that even if you understand your rights and you try to exercise those rights, sometimes it doesn't become as effective. For instance, I made an example about an organization that I worked for, where we actually, a group of us as staff, looked at the values of the organization, looked at the policies of the organization, to a point of actually taking the organization to CCMA, because we understood that this organization is an organization with great values, at least we believed, and we also understood that as employees we have rights, but in that case what we actually found was that the organization used its financial muscle and got itself the most powerful lawyers in Africa to actually fight a few employees. And at the end of the day, we actually found that the money they used in employing those lawyers could have been used in a much different way that would have left both the organization and the employees in a much better space. So I kind of wonder how you deal with those kind of issues. And then like right now, you also mentioned something earlier. I mean, I was talking to a young man today who was actually saying, even around COVID, he knows that his organization has actually gone ahead and applied for UIF on their behalf. And they've been trying to actually approach the organization to say, we don't have work. Have you applied for us? And the organization has actually decided not to respond whatsoever. And then, of course, this is something that applies to both women and men, but we know that most of the times, because of the intersections around oppression on issues of women and oppression and discrimination, women find themselves in even much worse situations.
Yeah. I think there's so many issues in the workplace that are affecting both women and men, obviously disproportionately. And hopefully that regardless of what the issue is, how political it is, using a power mapping tool might help us, at least to begin to navigate through. Yeah. So let me quickly get into the tool that you can use. It is very simple. Some of you have used this before. It's got different variations. It's got different ways that people have used it. Others have used it in negotiating with governments, doing advocacy. Others have used it to convince their notorious mother-in-laws to let them go off the hook. Others have used it, in the workplace to get a pay rise and all of those things. So it's entirely up to you to decide how you want to use this power map. So this is just a simple map that I got. It's visual, as you can see. And just going back to the issue that Tembela raised of, not giving a person resources regardless of them claiming UIF. So you are in this situation and you know that your manager, who is the decision maker, is the one that has the power to effect that change and make sure that you get those resources from UIF. So how do you do it? So you get a small piece of paper, and if you are following, you can, if you have a paper somewhere now, you can just follow the conversation, get a piece of paper and a pen, and then we can do a quick map. So the first thing you have to do is that you need to first and foremost ask who has the power to decide in this organization. So let's give an example of the issue of data, for example. You are in COVID, you've been asked to go and work from home, but you don't have data. And you need to convince your manager that they need to give you money for that data. So who is the decision maker? So you need to identify, you can draw a little line on your paper, put that person in there. This is the person that moves the needle. It's not a person that talks to the manager, to talk to another manager, to the next manager. This is the person that signs on that check. This is the person that has influence over decisions that, about money and so on. You can have a couple of them, but in this particular case, this is where the buck stops and where the decisions are made. So once you identify who that person is, if you don't know, you can ask, within the organization and say, okay, we understand that there's this policy around working from home. Who actually made the decision? They'll tell you, okay, the decision maker is this person. This is the one who makes the decisions, and then we follow through. So you put that person in the middle. And then in your other quadrants, you can you can look at maybe the left bottom quadrant. You put the people who are less powerful, who have less influence on this decision maker. So you can write their names down and maybe then their positions. So, I mean, looking at the left quadrant, you can see that this decision maker does not listen to their family, friends, not even their pastor at church. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is a tough decision maker. I think you can, maybe they possess a coercive power. I would imagine everybody's scared of them, including their church members. So don't even get there to try and influence them on getting money for data to work from home. So you can put those that are less influential in the left bottom quadrant, and then circle the ones that you think who are those who have the most influence. So for example, you can put the ones that have the most influence on this decision maker could be the public influences, the media, for example, or your financiers. For example, I think someone was talking about the investors, you know. So you may have your investors, your shareholders you can put them in any quadrant because you still want to plot them. In each one of these quadrants, you may have somebody who may have the power to influence this decision maker. So you put the most people who they listen to. When they receive a call from their campaign manager, for example, know that they will be influenced. If they receive an email from their investor, they will jump regardless. So those are the people that you need to make sure that you circle. And then who do you have access to? So once you've plotted all of that, so who do you have access to? In fact, before you plot who you have access to, you want to plot. So for example, in this particular case, let's say the decision maker has got listens to the campaign contributors or the campaign manager. You can put a line there, a red line, and then you can put another line to the investor who is a shareholder, another line, you know that they're influenced by that. And it could also be that this manager or this decision maker listens to one of the experts in the organization. They feel that the expert, you know, knows everything. They will call Cheryl and everything. So you put Cheryl, the expert, you put a line there. And you could also put another line. It could be that the campaign manager has also an influence on the expert. You put another line that connects the decision maker to the campaign manager to the expert and back to the decision maker. So you can see the flow of influence that you need to go through. It could also be that the decision maker also, regardless of whether they have less influence in the family, but it could be that there is one person in the family that they still listen to. It could be the wife. So you can put another line that connects the wife to the decision maker and connects to the campaign contributor and the investor, and the other one to the expert in the organization. And once you have that, then you start asking yourself the question, who do I have access to? Who is it that among these people that have plotted, that have influence on this decision maker that I can actually approach? Remember, you also have collaborators who may not necessarily, you can put them, collaborators could be a donor, an investor, and an investor you may not, maybe you're too junior in the organization, you can't even send an email to them. You may want to put another line to the collaborator. So within the within the investor, for example, the shareholder, they may have a team. It could be an advisor that works with the investor or the shareholder that you could be at the level as you that you want to connect with. So that, you know, as junior as you may be, you might not send an email to the shareholder, but you can collaborate with the advisor to the shareholder. So you say, okay, like in this case where I talked about the lady who was hired and doesn't perform. So instead of just, apart from just working through the HR within the organization, I'd also advise them that they need to look at who are the technical leads in that donor agency, who they can begin to collaborate with, so that they begin to send emails to say, we need this report, we need to make sure, and then even throw a few threats as well to say, if you don't give us this report, you don't deliver by this time, we might withdraw funding. Imagine how that shakes. Money shakes everything. shakes even the CEO when they see that email from the, well, you're not doing, somebody might say, Babs, this is quite clandestine and you might land yourself into trouble. No, you won't land yourself into trouble. You're basically navigating through the power play in the workplace by identifying who is the one that makes the decision. And if you can't get to them, you can then navigate through that sequence of influence that I'm describing. So then you begin to say, okay, if I have this technician who is an advisor to the investor, and the investor is a good friend, they play golf together, decision maker, why don't I plant a seed in this technical lead person? So you talk to this person who is an advisor to the investor and say, we're really struggling, we have a problem here. You know, because of COVID, these are some of the issues. Trust me, that information will get to the decision maker, whichever way. And colleagues, please remember, we are, I don't know, I don't want to sound sexist that we complain too much as women, but the point is that sometimes we don't have specific asks. You may say, okay, I want the decision maker to do it. What is it you're asking? You're complaining you don't have flexible hours, you're complaining you don't have data, but what exactly are you asking? You know, so we need to have the ask so that when you go to the technician who is close to the investor, you should be able to say, this is what we're struggling with, and this is what we need. Can they put money in this? Can they rearrange, you know, maybe the cost structure? Is there a way that maybe we can work flexible hours? So you have specific asks, because much of the time decision makers don't have time. They want you to give them options which they can use to make decisions on. But if you go there and say, oh, the internet is not working, you look at you and say, okay, so do I look like an IT person? What do you want me to do? You say, sir, we don't have internet, and you know, I checked with 3 service providers, and these are the things that they can offer. Would you like us to go ahead with this? And you know, the decision is made. And that's how we need to position ourselves with the power mapping. So really, it's a simple tool, I can tell you, but very powerful when you apply it very well. So you can use it even on your family, you can use it on your church. You want to see who's calling the shots in the church. I've put, you know, one family member in there as well, and I've tried to map who is really calling the shots, and it's really worked well and worked wonders for me in my personal life. So I hope you've been encouraged to use this tool. It's very simple, and please feel free. If you've mapped something, I'll just hand over to Tembele now to just maybe get some more questions.
Yeah, thank you, Babs. That's actually quite interesting. I don't know, before I can come in, I have my own questions which yes. I will raise, but I just wanted to check Score, because I did say to her if she finds she would want to respond, it'd be nice if she could also come in. Let me just check that before I come up with my own questions. That's actually quite interesting, because many times we don't think that we can actually do this mapping, you know, when yes. we are confronted with challenges. So let me hear if you've got any thoughts to share.
I think this is very empowering for women, because you are actually giving us the tool. Because most of the time you sit there with your problem and wondering how are you going to influence, and the mapping only happens when you are really under stress, and you think you always associate the mapping to work, not yes. to navigating personal issues. So I find this turning around of this tool very useful for all of us, and it further speaks to what you started earlier on when you said how do you rechannel yourself or reposition yourself. So you can even do this for your own self, to say, okay, now this is what the organization is actually going. How do I influence these powers around what is happening? So it's such a wonderful tool, and I hope people can use it going forward. Thank you.
There's Michelle who raised her hand.
Tembele, you're on mute.
Yes. Thank you, guys. This is Michelle from Namibia. I feel so honored and privileged to take part in this discussion. Ladies, thank you so much. I wish I could, maybe I should put on the video. I've been driving as I was listening to all of you guys, and I don't know if you can see me, but nonetheless, it's okay.
Yes.
So I'm past now. I've been listening all along. And ladies, I just want to applaud you for having this conversation. And my input on this is really more like a question. See, when first of all, thanks, Barbara, for sharing this practical way of mapping power in the workplace and in any other situation in one's life. And I'm definitely going to use it. Now that I'm looking at it, unpacking it, I'm thinking, how exactly is it that I'm going to map out and use this power or this tool without being perceived as looking for some sort of favoritism or nepotism? So I'm expanding it more further to say, how exactly do I have that conversation with this technician who knows the investor, who knows the shareholder, for me not to be perceived as looking for a favor, but more a very intelligent way to pursue this goal that I have through this discussion I'm going to have with this technician. I just maybe when this time a tool in the how, if I can put it that way.
Yeah. That's an interesting one. I think this one, Michelle, is assuming that you are working, for example, if you're a data analyst, I'm just giving an example, and you work with the shareholders company. There are people under there who you link with on a regular basis. So these are your collaborators, basically. So you can just ask for a meeting and say, we just want to update you on the project and some of the issues that we're looking at. We want decisions to be made around this. You can't go directly to the decision maker. You do it in a way that you want to resolve some of the challenges that you're experiencing in the workplace. So this technician is not a person that you don't know. Remember, if you have access to that person, then you have some kind of a relation. They can even be lower level. So you can have a line of influence that is very, very lower level. So it may be that the technician is too high level. You might not have that conversation, but you map who is a technician involved with who you can actually be linking with, so that the information gets the technician to the shareholder and to the decision maker, so that you're not seen to be doing clandestine things or trying to get favoritism. Remember, you want to resolve an issue. It's not like you're trying to be funny. You're trying to resolve an issue that is impacting on your work and also the business. Because if you're not getting the tools for the trade, for example, you're not getting the right environment, then it becomes very difficult for you to work. So you can go as lower level as much to the collaborator that may eventually get to the person that makes the decisions. I hope that answers the question.
No, it certainly does. And what I take from this is basically when one engages with the technician, you engage in a way that your message really resonates with them, for them to be feel compelled to take this issue all the way up to the decision maker. I think the magic is in the how.
Yeah. So if you talk to the technician, what you need to go there with is to say that we have a challenge with data, and if we do not get this data, we're going to not achieve the objectives that the investors or the shareholders have asked us to do. So already that becomes a risk for them. It's a pain point. Whether the technician wants to listen or not, it's a bottom line because you've raised it. It is a risk. So you have to go there and say, brother, we're really not going to achieve this if we don't fix this. And if the shareholder hears that there's anything that is going to hinder their profits, I can tell you they'll jump and make sure that they resolve it. Some issues are easier than others. For example, if it's a sexual harassment issue, it's a very difficult one, very delicate one. And this is where, your external collaborators become quite key, like your hotlines, linking, doing a mapping of who are the other organizations that are working in this area of sexual harassment in the workplace. Because you can't go to the technician and say, your boss is trying to size me up and things like that, or he touched me in a different way. It becomes very tricky. So this is where now you use a different strategy where you look at other external platforms that you can use to report your case. It can be the police, it can be through your hotlines in the organization or other grievance procedures that you may have in the organization. Yeah.
All right, then thank you, Barbara. That's crystal clear.
You're welcome.
Before I come in, before I call share, perhaps I've lowered your screen. to allow the poll. I don't know whether Shay wants to talk us through the poll. But before that, I just want to point at something that you have said. I think I like what you're saying. Last week, one of the things that was raised was the whole thing of being activists at work. So, and I remember that Lolo, who's in HR, when she heard the terminology of being an activist, initially she said, no, I'm not an activist. And the reality, and I think what I'm hearing here is that we cannot wait for people to do things for us. We actually need to show our hands up and be strategic. And I'm actually thinking that one of the things that I learned when I was working for Oxfam previously was the whole thing around campaigning. And on what Babs is actually talking about, one of the key takes that I want us to be thinking about is how do I show the pain, like how do I make sure that when I speak or when I raise these issues, I'm actually touching on the pain of this other person. So what will happen if we do not act or if we do not shift? You see, you show the person the pain point. So I actually think the whole idea of being strategic becomes quite an important one. I know I can see that people have already started on the poll. Shay, you want to speak on that?
Yes.
Just to clarify the questions?
Yes. So guys, please mind that I don't have a video. It's gone really dark here and I'm at my sister's house and we don't have any electricity. My dad is trying to fix it. So, so you're just going to hear my voice. So what we're trying to get from you in this poll, and please do engage us with it on it. It's, do you understand the game of power and influence in the workplace? If this is really new and enlightening to you, please let us know. If this is something you've known, then we'll be glad to hear that. We also want to know if you feel safe and empowered to speak up at your workplace. And our final question is, does your workplace have appropriate and creative platforms that you feel safe enough to influence or engage with? So we're looking forward to getting your polls on that. I think I'll just share a few things that came on the chat whilst I have the platform. I think everyone is saying this is a really powerful tool, Barbara, so thank you so much for sharing it. Someone asked if you could make that presentation available. So if you don't mind sharing it, then we could share it via email. And then I think something came through earlier that I really thought maybe we could unpack, which was something that maybe we could use as a practical example for us to work through. So now I'm trying to find it. Give me a second. Okay, here it is. So Zanella said, I think that building one's power is very important. The issue of a collaborator, how does that work? Does that not open up side chats and not addressing the real issue? So I think that is such a critical one for me, because I think if you don't learn how to use or map out a collaborator and understand the context in which you hold that conversation with that person, can yes become a side chat. It can become just gossip in the coffee station. But if we learn how to craft these conversations well, we're able to actually move that needle with that collaborator who can then take it to the next person who is the decision maker. And I just want to pick up on a few things, and then Barbara, I'm going to give it to you to help us through this. But I think having those clear asks are so important. Knowing what you want changed really does change the conversation, because it's not about I'm saying, Barbara, oh, by the way, you know this, and this person's like this, and it's not about me going me, but rather about me saying, this is the problem. I think this could be a possible solution. Not only will I be a winner, but the organization will win too. What do you think? What are your thoughts? And we learned this. I mean, I think a lot of us who probably go to communication school or understand communication with the public, we understand it's so important for us to craft our words in the right way, but also to help people own an idea. So it's not my idea. I speak to Barbara and I make her feel like it was her idea. And when she feels like her idea, then she buys into it, she owns it. So when she's a sponsor on the table, she's not taking Cheryl's idea, but she's taking Barbara's idea. And so it becomes different. So I just thought that's having a clear ask and having a solution mindset is so critical for us as women to learn, get good at, rather than us to our default, which is, yes, we can have wine with our girlfriends and complain on a Friday night. But when you're in the office, how do you use strategic conversations to make change happen? for everyone. So Barbara, yeah, you can just pick that up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Before Babs comes in, can Ngati also share, I think there are some questions or one on Facebook.
Okay.
Ngati, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. I was just trying to navigate between the two. Okay, no, on Facebook, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, we can.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So on Facebook, no questions yet regarding the tool. It was just people still talking about the donors having too much power, and we were just encouraging each other to ask questions. So nothing new on Facebook.
Okay.
I saw one question from Samuel who's saying, what do we really mean by people in power? If I go to a line manager, they will point to the executive will point to the CEO will point to the board.
Oh, I wonder why it's not showing on my side.
So who's really in power?
That's a
Who's
good
holding
question.
the power? Yeah. Where does the buck stop? Does it stop with the board? Because the board can make decisions, and then you have to execute as the manager or as the director. So you have some power as well to influence where the direction of those decisions should be. Usually, line manager has some level of power. They may have not cohesive power, but they may have the positional power actually, which gives them a mandate and some level of authority to make certain decisions. And you need to understand at what level their mandate begins and what level their mandate ends, so that you don't waste a lot of time with your positional, with your line manager. Obviously, the shareholders, if you're working in a corporate company where you have shareholders, they have the final say, but that comes in form of maybe board resolution or shareholder declarations, whatever they're called, and those are the decisions that you have to follow through. So they become the ultimate decision makers. Yeah, and you guys will just need to be implementing. Zanele's question is an interesting one, actually. I see that we have about, is it 6 minutes before we end? So I just want to address, okay, we have 5 minutes. I want to address Zanele's question and then look at some of the creative spaces that we can explore in organizations if we have people who are in charge of that in these organizations. So the issue of collaborators, yes, Zanele, can be a tricky one, but what is key is that when you do your power map, you'll be able to know who you can influence with information power or with connection power or even expert power. So that, and like Cheryl said, it's not about going there to gossip about your incompetent director. No, it's really about going there to say, we have an issue here. And this issue is a do or die for the organization. And if we don't address it, this is what is going to happen to the organization. And you go there with information, with clear asks. I don't think people would suspect you unless you have other motives as well to maybe topple the director or do other things that may not be necessarily in the interest of the organization and yourself. So using a collaborator, I think it's important because, and the collaborator also, you need to find a collaborator who's also an ally. It could be somebody in the board. It could be somebody who's in management, who sits on those, and who's passionate about the issues that you're talking about. So you may not necessarily need to be at the table and do it yourself. And there's a small story that I heard quickly, if you allow me, Tembela, about how you can use what they call entry points. So this lady was coming to work in the morning. They were sharing a lift with one of the senior managers who sits on the board, who sits on the management team. And he asked her, how are you doing? You know, and she said, oh, well, I haven't been well because my child is been sick and I've been juggling work and workloads and trying to deal with my child. I mean, just the fact that you became vulnerable to this person and there was an opportune entry point for you to discuss with the person who has potential to influence, it becomes very, very interesting. Where do you drop those little nuggets What are the entry points that you have to drop those nuggets? You don't need to have a big conversation with a person. It's dropping those nuggets, having that entry point. So that manager went into the meeting and they were talking about COVID and other things and challenges and talked about work-life balance, which was addressing the issue that the woman in the lift had raised about balancing the child and the work. So sometimes it is just throwing those nuggets of asks at the right time to the right person. And in advocacy, we call them elevator speeches. So you could be just walking out, you bump into the CEO. Oh, how are you? Oh, well, instead of talking about politics and the weather, talk about your ask in a very nice way, you know, and you'd have planted that seed. And you can make, that's the power of influence, I should say. So if there are no further questions, let me just quickly run through my last slide. I'll run it really fairly quickly, if it's okay with you. Yes.
Yeah, no, but I actually think we will not have time for that because of the poll. Yeah, and then also because it's already 2 minutes past.
Oh yes, it's 2 minutes, you're right, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Sure,
Share, I
that's
don't know
fine,
whether
but
you are
just,
able to, oh, sorry.
Yeah, just to say that I think organizations also have a responsibility to create that enabling environment for people, particularly women, to thrive. It is by law. You need to remind them that they need to create that enabling. It's not a good thing to do. It's by law.
Yes, 100%. Thank you so much, Barbara. This has been so enlightening. And just, I think what I want to, and I spoke about this last week, I think what's really great is that today we spoke about personal responsibility. So what can you do and what's within your power to do? And what change can you affect? And we did say that we're going to help HR professionals look at how do they get better at playing their role in organizations. And I think, Barbara, we'll bring you back to look at that, at the organizational perspective. And what is it that organizations need to do and can do? And then how do we play that role in influencing organizations? And so we'll definitely pick this up. I don't think it's a one-off conversation. I think it's one we need to keep having. Just to bring in the poll quickly. So what's interesting for me is that 73% of us say that we do understand the game of power and influence in the workplace. And so that leaves me with many questions that if we do know it, and if we understand that there is power play in the office, how are we using that power well? So that's quite enlightening for me, because we might know it, but that doesn't always mean we know how to use the space in order to influence that power. The second poll tells us that 55% of us do not feel safe or empowered to speak up in the workplace. And I know that it was just a few number of us who actually did the poll, so I'm sure that number is going to be much higher if we had done it, if we do it with the entire group. And that's something we'll definitely look at. How do we help navigate the space from a place of feeling safe and empowered? And how do you speak up so that you don't become victimized? So that's interesting. So that's 55%. And then 55% as well says that the workplace does not have appropriate creative platforms for you to feel safe to influence decisions. And so I think that's something else for us to take up as well, that I think I read that question wrong. So there's 55 that say that the workplace does have appropriate and creative platforms. And that means that if it does, how are we using those platforms? And how are we showing up there to ensure that these platforms are used for us to get the change that we want? But on the flip side, 45%, so it was almost half, who said at the same time, the workplace doesn't have these. So I do think that we will continue this conversation, and we will also think about how do we provide you with tools to start to help start those lunch and learns. You might not actually need management to drive that. That could just be something you do together because you have influence with staff, and you would be able to start something like that. So when we come back with Barbara on another session, we'll definitely bring those kind of tools to you. And so now we know we have gone 1 minute over time, and so I'm going to quickly round up and then hand back to Tembela. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Barbara, for sharing this enlightening topic with us. We've been meaning to do this, and I'm glad that we finally dove in today. And I think one of my biggest takeaways, and I think if anything, when you get the copy of this presentation, go look at how do you grow in your information power. How do you grow in your expert power? How do you also grow in your connection power so that you do become that invaluable resource that everybody needs. And I think if there's any one big takeaway, take that away today, that you have a responsibility to grow in what you do. So are you reading? Are you learning? What are you reading and learning? How are you teaching that to others? And how are you getting better at what you're doing? If you are an expert, it means that you spent more than 10,000 hours on that particular topic that's made you an expert. And in terms of connection, how are you learning to be a better connector? And so one of the good books that you could read is probably how to influence people and make friends, how to make friends and influence people, I think it is. I think that's one of the best books for you to read.
I love that book too. Yeah.
So with that, I'm going to hand over to Tembela.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Babs. Honestly speaking, when I was speaking, I was on mute. I was also echoing those who are saying we've always used this power in the context of our work, but I've never really taken that and looked at how we can actually use it as women. And that is so true that, as women, we have all these tools around us. Perhaps tools that we are not even using at work, but tools that we have learned from our mothers and in our homes and everywhere else. But we never think about how can I actually, tap into those to actually better my world. And I think, I have a lot of notes on things that you have said that I'm actually feeling, I wish you can actually speak this louder, but one of the things that I actually want to emphasize is our connection power as women. I don't think this is something that we are doing, we're actually tapping into enough. And perhaps we might need to have a session just looking at that in terms of saying, how do we use that power? Because it's one of our biggest and strongest weapons that we have. So for me, the note that I want to leave you with is a quote from Nancy Klein, who talks about time to think. She's got a book, Time to Think. We love reading. Some of us are coaches. And she says, until we are free to think for ourselves, our dreams are not free to unfold. Let me repeat that. Until we are free to think for ourselves, our dreams are not free to unfold. And I think for me, these spaces, these conversations are actually spaces to help us to think, to actually nudge us to say, hey, we've got the tools. Babs is saying today we've got the power, and we need to use that power to actually free our dreams. A workplace where women can actually tap into and feel they can show up authentically is part of the dream that we have. How do we work together to make sure that we make that dream or those dreams unfold? So on that note, women, thank you so much. Go and have nice dinner. I don't know who has cooked for you because somebody at home is cooking for me.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Please stay well, stay blessed.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Stay safe.
Go ahead, unmute yourself and say goodbye.
Thank you.
Yes,
bye.
and thanks to those who are on Facebook Live as well.
Okay, bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, let me start Facebook Live.
Yeah.
Are you busy?